This podcast is being recorded on Kaurna land. We honour and celebrate the strong cultural traditions of motherhood, family and connection to country.
How Motherhood Changed Me is brought to you by Harrison Macmillan, Australia's leading recruitment firm run by women who live by values that make their mothers proud.
No woman can say motherhood hasn't changed her, but every mother's story is different.
You know, there are kids that are playing on games now, you know, Roblox, let's say, is a perfect example, that are full of predators, full of them. And they're in there for a reason. They're in there to try and find kids who are vulnerable. And I don't care what 8-year-old you talk to, they are no match for a predator, a charismatic, manipulative, a gendered adult who wants to get them to do something. And they know the triggers.
This is How Motherhood Changed Me. Hello, I'm Kerrie Turner.
And I'm Jenna Yates. Hello. So there's a topic that comes up in nearly every conversation we're having with mums, and that's screen time. Now, whether you have little kids wanting to watch YouTube or older kids wanting access to social media platforms, I don't know one parent, Kerrie, who isn't grappling with how to navigate this digital world.
Absolutely.
It's just a bit scary, actually. We're joined today by Yasmin London, who is a former police officer. She's now an online safety expert and the global director of digital resilience at Qoria, which is a tech company dedicated to keeping children safe and well in their digital lives. She's also a mum herself. And so we're really keen to pick her brain and get all her tips. So welcome, Yas.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies. It's great to be here.
Now, Yas, before we jump into things, we ask everyone at the start of an episode for one word that would describe you before you became a mum.
Oh, gosh. This is really hard. I'm a Libran, so I struggle with decisions. There's many words that would describe
Well, give
me.
us a couple if you
Before I became
like.
a mum, unprepared for what was coming. Unprepared would be
Fair.
the word.
Yeah, that
Very
is very fair. Yeah, very fair.
So we've joked about all of those perfect parents who say, you know, when I'm a mum, I'll never give my kids devices, and, you know.
It was me.
That was me as well. And then, you know, you become a parent, and it's a lot easier said than done when you're in the moment and you're needing hands-free, and, yeah, you get that, don't you?
100%. I think any parent that says that they don't hand a device to a child at one time or another when they're struggling to get dinner on the table or they just need a little bit of quiet time, they're lying. Everybody does it. You know, it's a different world in 2024 in today's day and age than it was when, you know, our parents had us. I don't know about you two, but, you know, there's certainly a lot of references to back in the day when I was a mother or when I had kids and, you know, what we did in the neighborhood. It's a different world here. So we do just need to focus, I guess, on that word balance. You know, it's about making sure that we don't go into excess by handing that device over too regularly, being mindful about what our kids are watching, making sure that it's the right content for their age and stage. And I guess parenting in the digital world, which for many of us, you know, it can be a little bit of a scary place, but it is that point in time now where parents do need to make sure that we're paying attention to what's going on in that online environment because it does have real world impacts.
Absolutely.
So true.
In my house, there's certainly, my kids didn't love it when it first came into play. I set a timer. I had to. It got to a point where I thought, this is ridiculous. They've had enough screen time, they've had enough TV, whatever it is. So we set a timer now. They didn't love it initially, but they get it. They understand now it's 20 minutes or it's 30 minutes and then the TV just turns itself off. Do you have screen time rules in your house?
Oh, absolutely. You know, there's days like the weekends where they might get a little bit more than I was prepared to give them. We don't necessarily have a timer per se, but what we do is we sort of focus more on the activity. So you're allowed to watch one movie or you can have 3 episodes, and we try to help them recognize when that 3rd episode is up and the expectations that we're not harassing them to turn it off, that part and parcel of the freedom that they might get is showing us that they can actually step up and give them some autonomy as well. You know, that's important for kids of a certain age. Obviously, with much younger kids, we can't expect them to do that. But certainly trying to teach them that self-regulation is something that we focus on in our household. We do have a couple of rules around when tech can be used. So we don't do tech at all in the mornings, knowing that, if they open up a game or if they watch television, it just doesn't set them up for the day the best way that they can be. So tech is sort of an afternoon thing at a time where it's relaxation time, I guess, for everybody. And we try to stick to that as much as possible.
How can we explain to them that it's not healthy for them to have it all the time? It's a hard conversation.
It is.
As you say, age appropriate, but, also us adults, we're probably on ours too often as well.
100%. Like, the biggest thing for parents is we have to role model. And again, nobody is perfect, but we do need to be really self-aware. How often are we having our heads in our devices? So I think it's sometimes talking about a thing called the opportunity cost and the purpose, again, of using tech. So for example, if I have my head in my phone in the afternoon and I've got quite a pipey 10-year-old who will tell me off, she assumes I'm playing on social media, but actually say to her, look, I'm actually booking your soccer practice. I'm buying you the sausage sizzle for State of Origin next Wednesday. I'm doing all the tasks so that you can actually do the things that you want to do. This is how we organize our lives. So it's also showing them that it's not just about entertainment, but we do talk about the opportunity cost. What am I missing out on in order to spend time playing on a game or watching YouTube? Perfect example we had over the weekend. We had some friends over who introduced our girls to a show called Norris Nuts.
Oh,
and
don't know that
it's
one.
an Australian family. Kids really love it. It's a pretty viral show on YouTube. And basically the premise is this family of, I think it's 6 kids, go into like a supermarket and they give each other tasks and they have this competition and it's a bit of fun. But to be perfectly honest, it's mindless. It's like watching other people live their lives. And so I had this conversation with my 10-year-old and said, look, what benefit do you get out of it? What are you enjoying about it? And she sort of said, oh, it's really funny. And I said, that's really valid to a point. You could watch one episode, and entertainment's really important that you enjoy yourself. But when you get to a point where you're like, am I missing out on living my own life because I want to be watching what Norris Nuts are doing today?
Yeah.
And am I going to do that for hours? And I sort of showed her as well how YouTube works. So how the autoplay feature works and what the ads do. So how they pop up and what they're trying to do in that moment. So I guess co-watching is really helpful. That's something we do a lot of because it allows you the opportunity to teach them in the moment. What is that ad saying? How does it make you feel? We've been watching this for 45 minutes now. Are you getting a bit agitated in your body? How can you recognize that it's time to switch off? So those sorts of those skills and those teachable moments I think are really important.
Yeah, that's such a good point too, because not all screen time is created equal. And if you chuck the kids on front of YouTube for half an hour, it's very different to them maybe playing a interactive ABC type game or something like that.
Exactly. And you've hit the nail on the head there because it is, even the World Health Organization has redesigned their guidelines to say it's actually quality screen time rather than quantity that we should be focusing on as parents. So what benefit are they getting from spending time online? Now, entertainment is a valid one. We all want that sort of time where we're just not thinking about anything and we find something funny and we want to watch it. That's totally okay. But there's some really great ways that screen time can be used. So one that I see a lot of now with older kids is the use of something like Canva. Spending time on Canva, learning how to design, learning how to use these AI tools, putting things together, being creative. That's great. That's really positive use of screen time. YouTube can be fantastic for learning new skills. But if we're watching the Norris Nuts versus, learning how to make a skateboard or how to build something or how to, put a piece of Lego together that you're not really sure how to do in real life and you watch a YouTube tutorial on it, those are 2 really different types of screen time. Both okay, but you're always going to lean more towards the one that enhances skill development and creative thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. My little boy, there's a show called Wild Kratts. and he
my
loves
kids
it.
love that too.
And some of the facts he has come out with, I'm like, are you sure that's right? And I'll look it up and he'll go, oh, it is right. Where did you learn that? And he'll say
100%.
wildcrats. He's teaching me things.
That's good.
My 7-year-old's the same. There's one with like the silkworms or something, and what the silkworms do underneath or the worms do underneath the ground. And we talk about that when we're going to bed at night and over the dinner table. So there are some great programs. And I think sometimes it's also about sitting with them, learning what are the good ones and ones that are kind of a little bit mindless, and steering them where you can towards the ones that are going to help them learn about the world. And that's where screen time can actually be really beneficial. And it also shows, importantly, as a parent, that you understand the role that technology can play in your kids' world. One of the things that we see, or I see a lot when I go out and speak to parents, is there are ones that are really petrified by technology, and they watch the media where it's all catastrophized, and there absolutely is huge problems, don't get me wrong, but there's also benefits. And if we are constantly as parents talking about the negative side, the risks, the terrible things that are going to happen, that creates a disconnect between us and our kids, who actually, for the most part, have a really positive experience with tech and enjoy it and like it. So it shows the opportunity for us to connect with them on a positive level, so that if something does go wrong, they know that you're not anti-tech as a parent, and that you might actually have half a clue how to help them because you use it yourself.
I actually really appreciate that comment, because it can almost feel, I suppose this is the world we live in now, and my husband, at least, we have conversations, of course, about this all the time. He is on his computer a lot, was very into tech as a kid, and he sees all of these amazing benefits. And I mean, look at all of those so-called nerds from back in the day. They're all
successful.
They've created all these amazing programs, and he sees it like that. And by not letting our kids be on, we're hindering them, because those are the jobs of the future, and they need to know how to use it. And then I see all these downsides, and we have these conversations, but it's
finding a balance.
Finding a balance.
That's
But
right.
like you say, stepping into their world and being part of it with them, and not just chucking them on because it's the babysitter for half an hour.
Exactly. That's the difference. It's about, getting in there and learning about the things that they like. It might not be what you want to do, to be honest, after a long day, at work, when you've got a million other things to do. But those little micro moments where you just jump in and go, who's that? Who are you talking to? What is it about this game that you really like? If you've got older kids and they're on social media, why do you follow that influencer? What is it about them that really, makes you curious about what they have to say? So non-judgmental, curious kind of approach. But it is important to be involved, and I really do believe it is important to equip them with those skills, because it is going to be a digital future. They do need to know how to exist in these worlds and to use those tools. So an example that I had with my 10-year-old, she had to write a speech for a presentation. And on the weekend, we used ChatGPT to have a look at some of the interesting things that was on the Paris Olympics.
That's so cool. I love that.
What are we going to do? What can we share, that nobody will know about the Paris Olympics? And, that it's the first games where there's equal female and male athletes. So there's exactly the same number, where gender equality exists, where they've got these amazing environmentally friendly velodromes that they're putting into place. And I would never let her on that, without me, but I can control that environment because I'm there and I'm present and we're doing it together. And her mind was blown.
Yeah.
And to me as a parent, I'm doing her a disservice if I don't introduce her in the right ways at the right time with my supervision to the tools of the future. Now, there might be people that listen to this and go, how could you let your 10-year-old on ChatGPT? And I didn't let her go, there's not a second that I wasn't
down the
there.
rabbit hole. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's about opening her eyes to the opportunities of the future. And that, to me, is equipping and empowering my daughter to participate fully in that world that she's going to have to exist in a few years on her own.
Totally. It feels like it's scarier the older they get too, but it almost feels like the more we sort of step in now, the younger they are, the best impact we can have. I mean, the whole social media thing, I mean, that's a whole other world we can step into now. we're so far away from that, but also
Yeah.
we're kind of not really, because I know some
No.
kids who are too much older than my kids who do have social media profiles.
Yeah, social media is a different beast for sure. My advice on that is delay it as long as you can.
Yeah.
You know, social media it is addictive by design. Again, there's some great parts of it. You know, there's some really good benefits depending on the child and the environment that they exist within and what they're trying to find out from social media. But certainly, if you've got younger kids, I'd really encourage every parent listening today to try and delay access, because once you hand that over, you are opening them up to the world, to a range of different opinions, people who share quite, you know, conflicting advice, concerning advice, damaging content. It's all there. So they do need to be at an age where they are able to discern fact from fiction. What I would suggest as well for any parent listening, if you've got younger kids and you are sort of starting to introduce that, if you have a 13-year-old, for example, put a parental control tool on that device. Make sure that you have some semblance of control over what they have access to and when they have access to it. And above all else, do not let them have that device in their bedroom. You know, really important to keep control of it, and see how you go.
My eldest is 8, and we talk at home about, you know, she wants to know when she can get a phone, of course, because that's what 8-year-olds talk about. And we said to her, you'll get a phone when we think you're ready for it.
Yep.
But it will also be a phone that, like what we had when we first got mobile phones, you can only call us on it. It won't have access to all of the apps. And she's like, well, that's not fun. I said, well, that's what a phone is. You use it as a communication tool. You don't use it as the internet that's in your pocket all the time. She wasn't so sure about that. She'll come around. I said, well, it's that or it's nothing. I'm sorry. And that will still be a few years off. But is that hurting her because she'll be that one girl that doesn't perhaps have the smartphone, but I'm also not prepared to just let her slip into that world?
Well, she's 8, right? So I'd fully support no phones at the age of 8, of course. It depends. I guess it always depends on what's the purpose of it, because they want a smartphone because everybody else has it. And really it's about that accessibility and connection to their friends. Now, what I do, I guess, share with parents who want to give the dumb phone over is I'm supportive of it, certainly. But what we've got to understand is that issues can still occur even if they don't have access to the internet. They're certainly minimized. But one of the things that we see, for example, is group chats, so kids being excluded from certain group chats. It's called a term called cyber ostracism, which actually is one of the biggest issues that kids report as concerning to them, that I'm not included in that chat, I'm not included in that game. And that can happen on a text message chat just as easily. So if they're texting on a dumb phone, for example. And then I think the other part of that conversation is, are we going to allow them to participate in a controlled way? And at what time do we want that to happen? So typically parents might hand over a device at the start of high school. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Often kids will get their own devices anyway. They'll get learning devices and they can access social media through that as well. So while it might sound like a great idea in theory, and I am supportive of it, giving the dumb phone, they will find a way around it. And if they know that you're anti-social media, they might just access something like Snapchat or TikTok on a URL on their device that they might get for school, or any other device that they want to.
And then I suppose you're opening the whole keeping secrets. I hadn't thought of it that way, that I want the conversation to always be open between my children and myself.
That's right.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
It's an important
Kerrie.
thing to think about. No, and it's not. I think it's a good strategy, especially for the next couple of years. But as they get older, you know, they are just going to be a little bit more sassy. They're going to try and find ways around it, because our number one biological driver is to be connected, is to be part of something, to be part of that group. And especially when they do, go into high school and they meet new friends, for example, they want to be part of it. And so I think it's helpful to facilitate ways to do that. And that might not be social media initially, but it's about being aware of their need to be connected.
Walkie-talkies.
I love it.
What can we do?
I love
This
it.
is why I love this fantastic campaign, the 36 months campaign. We've seen you talk on that as well, Yaz. So obviously that's calling on the Australian government to increase the legal age at which kids can join social media from 13 to 16. So essentially giving them an extra 36 months
to be a kid.
And that's such a powerful message. And if parents can get across that and realise, you know, if we're all in on that, the kids are good. They're not going to have their friends on there that want to be on there. Can we all please make a collective decision to not?
Just a pinky swear.
Pinky swear.
I think that's what every parent would love, right? I was saying to someone the other day, this is a bit of a political issue as well. We've had, Prime Minister Albanese coming out talking about the fact that this is what we should do. And, I sort of said to someone, whoever can make this happen, whichever side of politics, will have every single parent behind them saying, yes, you have my vote. But the problem with 36 months, and I've said this to them as well, is the enforcement. How do we make everybody do this? If every single parent in the country said, yes, I'm in, then amazing. But the reality is we've got a bunch of kids that already have social media. We've also got a bunch of parents, to sort of go back to how we started this conversation, who have devices given to them because their parents are busy dealing with other things. And that might be, privileged parents who want a bit of a break, but it might also be parents who are suffering from ill mental health themselves. It might be women who are trying to deal with a very violent, domestic violence situation, that are dealing with issues that are significant, and sometimes that is their saving grace. And so we've got to be considerate of all facets of this conversation. So that's, I guess, piece one. And then piece two is, how do we enforce it? And so this brings us back to this age verification debate. There's a lot of issues around, I guess, platform resistance to using different tools to prevent kids from going on them. The current strategies that have been put into place are really easy to bypass. So kids will use, for example, VPNs to show that they're in a different location to bypass the age verification in Australia.
And stuff that we can't even think of as parents.
Exactly.
I mean, they're clever.
They are switched on.
They are so clever. There was something I saw the other day which was frightening. So one of the age verification or age assurance strategies is a facial age estimation tool. So it doesn't collect data, but it will scan a person's face to determine how old that they think that person is. And a lot of it's quite accurate.
Okay.
But I saw last week kids using deepfake technology, so creating an adult face, attaching that to their webcam and bypassing biometric testing with a deepfake video.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
So this is the thing.
How do they do that?
They are clever.
They are.
Here's me struggling to put together a reel.
What's a reel?
Oh gosh. So that's sort of the level that we're at. We have really, really clever kids that are able to get around it. So it's great in theory. And I absolutely advocate for 36 months purely because the awareness raising that it's had for parents in talking about this, in having discussions with their kids, it's amazing. And there's more to come, of course. But we can't think that changing a law that can't at this point be enforced is going to be the fix, because what it will also do is it will have parents sort of operating under this false sense of security, like this is the law, therefore everything's fixed, when actually it's just sending everything underground. And that's where things are really risky.
Yaz, can I ask, what made this the area that you wanted to focus on? Did something happen? Have you experienced something? Is it your life as a police officer? At what point did you go, I know what I need to do with my life? And it's educating people on online safety.
It's a great question. I have spoken a fair bit, I guess, over the last couple of years about an experience I had as a police officer back in 2012, so a little while ago now. I worked in an area called Rose Bay, which is in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and it's got a really infamous suicide hotspot there known as the Gap, which is a 96-metre high cliff top, where I was up there probably at least multiple times a week as a police officer, sometimes multiple times a shift, depending on the time of year. And I had a suicide negotiation with a 14-year-old girl up there.
Oh, yes.
Now, thankfully, I was able to get her over the correct side of the fence. My colleagues were able to help as well. But that situation occurred because she'd experienced some pretty severe cyberbullying. And as a police officer there, I dealt with lots of adults at that location, and I'd worked quite a lot in schools at different points in time throughout my role as well, because I was a youth liaison officer. But I just had this penny drop moment where I was like, this is having a serious impact, real world impact on our kids. And I had been, up until that point, given this really bad PowerPoint by the police force with a bit of legislation on it called the Telecommunications Criminal Code Act, which basically said if you bully someone, you're going to go to jail for 15 years, which is ridiculous. It's never going to happen for a kid anyway. And I remember going into those schools and it was just like boring. They didn't connect with it and it wasn't helping them. And so what I wanted to do after that experience was create something that has impact for them, that actually shows that there are adults around that will be allies and advocates for them and will teach them and understand the benefits as well, so that they'll listen, I guess, when we talk to them about the risks. And so that's sort of what started it off for me. I wanted to just do more and have more impact, and things grew from there, really.
Wow.
Well, you're doing a good job. You are doing a very good job.
Thank you.
Absolutely. But, it's easy for us, I think, as well, probably the social media and the tech that we used, it wasn't constant and all the time. And it's easy to think, oh, we'll switch off. But it's not that easy. And I don't know what the statistics or the research shows for a kid who is going through that. Why can't they switch off? It's a lot more complicated than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's their lifeline in many ways. It's their connection to their friends. It's the FOMO effect in full force. It's the social pressures. It's societal pressures to know, what's going on and who's who in the zoo. It's not as easy as just saying switch off. We've got to teach them how to moderate and self-regulate. And we've also got to role model that, as we said, in our own homes, because they'll crucify us if we ask them to do something that we're not prepared to do ourselves. And so this whole question of banning, it doesn't work because it's not a long-term strategy. It's a short-term strategy. The long-term strategy is much harder. It takes time, commitment, consistency, educating ourselves as parents so that we can answer the questions that our kids have for us, and not turning around and going, oh, I'm a Luddite, I don't get technology, I don't understand it. Because what that tells our kids, as much as we might think it's a joke, is if I have a problem, mum or dad, they're not going to have a clue how to help me. So is it worth going to them and showing them what I've done if I feel like I'm to blame, for example, or I've done something wrong, risking being criticized for no solution? That's what we've got to solve. We've got to solve that solution. Come to me with anything. I might not know how to fix it exactly, but I'll know some good strategies that we can start with, and I'll learn and we'll do it together.
And I feel like even adults have that disconnect with the internet. I mean, you see some comments that adult people are making toward other people. It's like there's a person on the other end of that nasty message that you're writing.
Absolutely. And would you say that to that person's face? No, of course you wouldn't. You're hiding behind this online persona. Who knows if it's even your identity? But the power that these trolls and the bullies online get by thinking I can write this and no one knows who I am. Yeah. They can't find me.
Exactly.
It's horrible.
It's actually a thing called the online disinhibition effect. So we all sort of experience it from time to time. What we see in that instance is the really negative side of it. People who are prepared to say and do things that they would never say to someone's face. There's also the flip side where, you might have experienced this. I know I do. If you see someone's wedding photo or their baby, they've had a baby, you sort of go, you go way over the top in complimenting how they look and, oh my gosh, that baby's so amazing. It's so beautiful. Or that dress, you look like a princess or whatever it is. That's the same sort of thing. We're going a bit OTT compared to how we would in a face-to-face situation. But yeah, it is a big problem. And the adults of the world really struggle with this as well. It's something that I'm really passionate about. Kids are absolutely, my passion, but I'm starting to see as well that there's this real need for adult education. How do we become digitally resilient? How do we make sure that we're not just looking at protecting the software and the hardware and the computers that we use? How do we create the skill set and the resilience of the people, the humans using them, so that we can actually deal with the future that's coming at us? And if we think about metaverse realities and augmented realities and where we're sort of heading, if we can't get these online harms under control, they're only going to become more hyper realistic and harmful for everybody. So it really is about focusing on, how do I help myself? How can I de-escalate a situation? How can I be a positive bystander? All the things that we teach our kids, we need to think about how we can do that in our own lives as well.
Can we have a moment for our incredible partners, Harrison McMillan?
We love everything they stand for, Jenna, so let us share why this top recruitment firm decided to sponsor our podcast about motherhood.
Well, the name Harrison McMillan comes from their founders' mothers' maiden names, chosen to reflect their core belief to always conduct business in a manner that would make their mothers proud.
Their leadership team is female-led, and with 7 kids between them, they truly understand the act of balancing motherhood and work.
They're passionate about placing professionals, including working mothers, in roles that acknowledge and support their transition back into the workforce.
And they've seen firsthand how mums can smash productivity goals. There is truly no one more capable than a multitasking mum.
Harrison McMillan was started 11 years ago on the back of an idea and has grown into a well-respected agency with 30 employees.
They service over 500 clients all over Australia and are well known for their trustworthiness, accountability, innovation and people-first approach.
It's a match made in heaven if you ask me, Kez.
It is so important that your values align with where you work, and that's why your business should visit harrisonmcmillan.com.au. Back to something you said earlier about when the time comes that you give your kids a device, do not let them have it in their bedroom. In our house, we've got a box by the front door and the phones go into the box when we get home. But when it's bedtime, the charger is in the bedroom.
You get it out.
We need to already, with a 6 and 8-year-old, I guess, have the, and my husband would say, oh, but it's my alarm clock. Well, we'll need to buy an old school alarm clock for the bedroom because
that's the oldest trick in the book.
I thought if we already need to start modelling that our phones don't go in our room. They're never in there. I need to reassess my house.
Some of the things
I need
that
to
I
revisit
know,
a few things.
Some of the things that I know as well is, that blue light, it's really bad for you to be able to get to sleep.
Switch your brain off.
You know, those boundaries that we can implement at a young age to show them that this is how you need to do it.
Yeah, I need to
sure.
reassess a few
things. It is about role modelling. And nobody's perfect. No. Everybody has their reasons for things. And sometimes those reasons are totally valid. You know, there might not be a PowerPoint in the right spot in the kitchen of the house or whatever it might be for some people. So you make the best of what you got, but it's about having that understanding of why you're making certain decisions. And again, talking your kids through that. The blue light conversation's a really great one because what we know is it does suppress the melatonin development in your brain, and the smaller the device, the more powerful that blue light is. So a phone is going to create more blue light than a television. And the other part of that is we hold our phone close to our face. So the intensity is higher there as well. And so these are interesting things just to talk to our kids about. You know, it's something that I would talk to my 10-year-old about and just have a discussion. It doesn't need to go anywhere, but it's just sharing, I know a bit about this. Yeah. What do you think? And it opens up a larger conversation if you need to as well sometimes. Why don't we keep phones in the bedroom? Well, there's a couple of different reasons for this. I find it hard as an adult to switch off if I'm looking at my phone in bed, so I take away the temptation for that because I know I struggle as well. You know, that connection of showing your imperfections and your vulnerability is something that keeps that communication open. If they're a bit older, you know, you can talk to them about the risks of grooming and online predation and, you know, the huge issue at the moment that we've got with young boys, teenage boys and sextortion. You know, they are being directly targeted at the moment by organised crime, organised crime organisations, I should say, who are trying to connect with them on social media, trying quickly to get a nude image from them, where they'll sextort them, they'll blackmail them, ask for money. They will apply a huge amount of pressure, and the feelings of shame and embarrassment for those young boys prevent them from actually seeking help. And we've seen, unfortunately, the worst case scenario happen over and over again for some of those families. So, it is important to have regular conversations, inform them, ask their opinion, have that two-way connection over the online world, because, as I said, it does have real-world consequences if we don't, bother with those important conversations.
There's so much scary stuff out there, and that's like you say, just the screen time thing's one thing, but then there's
the online predators My daughter's in year 3, and they started with the littlies in their first year of school, but age appropriate education. But she has watched a video this year at school about a 14-year-old girl who gets talking to someone online who she believes to be someone her own age. And the video then shows that this girl agrees to meet this person at a playground near school and didn't tell anyone that's where she was going. And she got to the playground and the person waiting for her was an adult grown man. And it's starting to teach that, do you actually know who you're speaking to online? Don't give away too much information. This girl had shared photos of herself and her age and her what school she went to. This person knew all sorts of information. Obviously that is been created to show in schools. Yeah. But it's also
it's a real world situation too. Yeah.
Yeah. And
exactly.
I asked her how it made her feel. I was hopeful it wasn't going to be scared. She was interested. Her answer was, Mum, I found it really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. Apparently there are further episodes in this series. We'll see how things go as she watches more, and I hope it continues to be something she finds interesting and asks questions. But it was a lot for me, not knowing the video was being shown at school. When she came home and told me, I was like, oh, gosh, you're only 8.
Yeah.
But it's the age we need to get them at, isn't it? Start that education.
It sure is. It is confronting. Like, I'm with you. You're kind of like, are they ready to see this and hear this? Are we ruining their beautiful innocence by talking about this sort of stuff with them? And, the really critical point that we need to focus on is developmentally appropriate. So, not scaring them, not telling them too much, just doing it bit by bit. But it is important because there are kids that are playing on games now, Roblox, let's say, is a perfect example, that are full of predators, full of them. And they're in there for a reason. They're in there to try and find kids who are vulnerable. And I don't care what 8-year-old you talk to, they are no match for a predator, a charismatic, manipulative, agendered adult who wants to get them to do something. And they know the triggers. So, I'm writing a report at the moment on this topic in particular. And what I'm seeing, even with the use of AI, and how predators are using these tools to personalize and target their attacks on kids. They're using tools, AI prompting tools, to get AI to role play with them as a 10-year-old so that they can find out what are the buzzwords I should use for a 10-year-old that's going to get them to respond. And they're creating these predator playbooks and selling them on the dark web, so other people can learn those same skills. How do we bypass the safety protocols that have been put into some of these platforms to prevent this use? So, where there's a will, there's a way. And so I would always err on the side of caution. I'd rather my kids be educated. I'd rather have those controlled conversations with them so that they understand that people aren't always who they say they are when it comes to the online world. We've got to have those regular, consistent conversations where we're getting them to question what's going on.
And the internet is scary. So is it okay that we maybe do teach them something or share something that is a little scary? Because that's the truth of it, isn't it? I don't know. I don't know if I would be worried about scaring them, because that's a good thing. Then they might listen to me.
For some kids, for sure. I think, look, there's a lot of apathy with kids. Some of them just think they've got it all covered. Even younger ones, bless their little cotton socks. But We do need to show them the reality in the right way, scaring them to the point that they might never want to participate, or they create an irrational fear. We know our kids, we've got to watch that.
Yeah.
And some kids might be more sensitive than others.
Yeah.
But, facts, information, asking their opinion, involving them in the conversation, giving them, a voice is incredibly important, because kids want to have those conversations. They want to show you what they know. And if you know a bit about it as well, you can do those temperature tests pretty regularly to say, if this was to happen, what would you do?
Yeah.
Who would you go to? Would you respond? Would you block them? Who could help you? Where could you report it? Where on Roblox do you find the report button? These are all capabilities, they're capacity building skills that we need to build in our kids from as young as they're on devices, essentially, and can understand how to get there.
Yeah.
I also need to educate my mother, who's nearly 70,
when she babysits.
for her online safety.
Yes.
I need to educate her too.
Oh, well, yeah, there's all of that stuff
Scams,
too.
it's a different age group, but I'm just listening to all of this. I'm like, it sounds like I need to have a chat to my mum.
You do. I mean, my dad is obsessed with TikTok. He has no idea how addicted he is. I bless him. He will watch golf because he's obsessed with golf. So he will watch golf TikTok after golf TikTok after golf TikTok for hours. It is interesting. I try to say to him, Dad, how about we leave the phone at home when you come over next time, and we'll see a bit more engagement there. But we all struggle with it because it's designed for us. It's incredibly addictive. It is content that is promoted on our feeds that is known to engage. So, we do need education and mindfulness and importantly, strategies to manage it. I had this conversation with my 10-year-old over dinner last night. We all have the same goals. We might want to disconnect from technology or have more balance, but it's actually the strategy that gets us there. How do we create habits that help scaffold that decision, and teaching them how to do that. This conversation was more directed to listening to mummy when I asked the first time to do something, but it's
how
an
many
important
times
one
do I say that? If you'd listened the first time.
How are you going to remember to listen the first time? I don't know.
I was listening to this really excellent chat, and they were talking about the algorithms and the genius behind this, and perhaps that's a really good angle to talk to the kids from, and say, this is really clever stuff that's actually meant to keep us hooked and keep you watching. Exactly. And I don't know, we can beat it, and let's be smarter than them, or something like that.
Totally.
Snapchat, there are some really weird bullying sort of.
I don't know a thing about Snapchat. I don't understand how it works. That's out of my.
It seems innocent enough, but there's a few little. I don't even know what you call the word, but I guess features of Snapchat. So one of them is streaks, and they want to encourage these kids to keep sending the image to Kerrie today. Oh, you're on a 7-day streak.
No.
Don't stop the streak now. So there's not only that, and then they also show you, okay, so Kerrie and Yaz, they're on 17-day streak. Oh, but I thought Kerrie was my best. So Kerrie's messaging her, and there's all this kind of stuff like that I think really sort of frightens me.
It's like the old chain letter.
And
if you don't keep your streak going, you'll self-destruct.
And there's another thing that you can see where all the other Snapchat users are. So potentially everyone's over at your place, but I haven't been invited, but I can see that.
Locations.
So there's things like that.
Oh,
and,
wow.
so there's some features that, it seems innocent enough until you sort of scratch the surface more. And I don't know, can we hold these tech companies responsible for anything? Yes, they don't seem to care.
We absolutely should be. There is work being done, particularly over in the US. So there's some legislation that's going through the Senate at the moment called the Kids Online Safety Act, which is targeting those features that they say are addictive. So streaks, for example, creates a whole range of issues. As you mentioned, bullying is one of them. Are you... Or I guess feeling upset that somebody might be a better friend than another. But it's also the social pressure that comes from dropping a streak. So let's say, for example, you say, all right, we're going to have a digital detox weekend this weekend, darling, and we're all going to put our phones away. And your child is part of, we say, a 17-day streak. There's kids in schools at the moment where their streaks are going in excess of 1,000 days.
Wow.
So over the weekend, it's their turn to return the streak, and they don't have access to their device. So what happens then is they're either responsible,
You broke
which
that.
is
Yeah.
exactly, it's a massive pressure, social pressure for a kid. You broke that streak, or you're going to share your login details with someone else so they can do it for you. So, it does create a whole range of issues there. So should we be holding them accountable? Absolutely. Is there work being done? Yes. Look, it's again one of those complicated areas where there's a lot that needs to change, but we do need to make sure that we're applying pressure consistently and globally to these organizations, because they will not self-regulate. They will not choose safety of kids over commercial profit. That's what it comes down to. And they've got their eye on, a multifaceted organization, not just, the importance of kids' safety, which is sometimes a hard thing to hear for a lot of adults, particularly parents. So it is about holding them to account. The other thing that I would say as well is a lot of this legislation is really focused on the big social media platforms, the TikToks, the Instagrams and the Snapchats. But they are, as much as you might not believe this, among some of the safest platforms out there when we compare to less regulated, smaller platforms that don't have the trust and safety teams, that don't have the budget for human moderators, that are based in locations around the globe where legislation is just very weak. So there's one, for example, that actually closed down finally after about 12 years of advocacy, called Omegle. Omegle was, I think it originated in France. It had connections to Latvia, but basically the tagline for Omegle was connect with strangers. And what it did was attach kids that jumped onto this platform with adults who were basically predators, and they could have these one-on-one conversations.
Oh my gosh.
And video chat, all that sort of thing. So a platform like Omegle is far more risky, in my opinion, than a controlled version of Instagram, where we look at Instagram that has, upwards of 30 to 40 safety features that they've developed to protect kids. So, you can hide particular words if there's a word that a bully uses to target you that might not be as common as other ones. It'll tell you when you've hit a time limit. So for an hour, for example, was your time limit. It'll give you an alert to say maybe it's time to take a break.
Yeah.
There's a family safety centre that parents can use to supervise who their kids are talking to and how much time they're spending. So there's a lot to consider. So I would really just encourage parents to, yes, of course, focus on the big ones, but pay attention to the smaller ones that your kids are using, the lesser known ones, because sometimes they can be much worse than your TikToks and Instagrams of the world.
Gosh. Yaz, I have made a very conscious decision with my social media not to share photos of my children that identifies them. There might be photos of them walking in front of me down the street, so it's the back of them. Nothing that they can be identified by. And I get asked why is it the back of my head? Why were you taking photos of us as we skip down the street? But I recently had it confirmed to me that I'm doing the right thing for my kids. Everyone does their own thing, that is fine. But again, back to my daughter, she loves a bit of laptop time. When it comes, her teacher will say, like, for the next hour, last hour of the day or last half hour of the day, it's free choice on the laptops. It's like giving her a bag of lollies. She thinks it's the best thing in the world. She made a PowerPoint presentation, which I, first of all, was very impressed by, because I know nothing about making PowerPoint presentations. And she printed it off.
Screen time.
Yes,
I love it.
yeah. But it was about my family. I've brought it in show and tell. So in my family, I have my dad, mum, brother, puppy, and my bunny. Page 1, this is my mum, and she had a photo of me. It's like, where did you get the photo? She said, I just typed in your name on the internet.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And up it came. And I've consented to my photo being on the internet. That's okay. But it was so easy for her to find me.
All right, show us.
And
at least it's a nice photo.
oh, yeah, true.
I was going to say,
But
at least you selected a good one.
But I said to her, she said, I couldn't find a photo of me or Bo, her brother. And I said, there's a reason, because I don't want you to be able to access photos that easily.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it. I was a little bit like, oh, maybe I should reassess how many photos of me are online.
A good lesson for her, though.
Yeah, it was a really good lesson for her, and confirmed to me that I will continue to not share photos that identify my kids. For me, that just doesn't sit right. That I want them to be kids.
I agree. I a few years ago, I had shared a couple of pictures of my girls as well. And I, even as someone who works in this space, I kind of toyed with this. I don't want, the negative to influence my decisions to share positively, with my family and friends, those important moments or whatever it might be. However, I have changed my tune in the last little while, particularly with the rise of AI. I've taken all the pictures of my kids down. And look, once you've posted things, they can be anywhere, but I can make it much harder to find. And the reason that I have changed it is I have seen what can happen with a single image, and what, again, back to that predator conversation we had earlier, what can happen with the creation of deepfake technology, what can happen with a single picture when it is sold on the dark web and commercialized. It's not something I'm prepared to risk anymore. And it's weird because you do get into the habit of posting a lot, and when you stop and when you're mindful about it, it's not actually that hard. Well, I'll still share photos with my family through a private message, through private text messages. If there are parents listening today that still want to do that and they don't want to go to that extreme, there's ways of creating a safer experience. So making sure your friends lists and your follower lists are private, that your account is private, that if you're going to take a picture of your kids, don't do it in school uniform. If you do anything, make it black and white so that the colours are harder to identify. Make sure that their names on the back of their school bags, which typically happens, are not captured in a shot. You've got to be more mindful about it. And it is a personal preference, but I do think, it's one of those things where if I can keep them as safe as possible, if I can minimise the chances of harm coming to them, then I'm going to make that sacrifice for my own personal gratification and sharing in those moments. I'd rather choose that safety for them. It's a tough one though, and it is. I have no judgment on parents that do want to share, but I would just really encourage some mindfulness around what you're sharing and not being naive to the fact that it's just your friends who are looking at it.
It reminds me of the stranger danger campaign from, was it probably back in the 90s? And I think, we have that fear of people in real life. We probably don't have it as much as we should for online, because the real life stuff, I suppose, is a much smaller chance and percentage of happening than what the risk is online. Potentially we need to flip the way we see things and be a little bit more focused on the online world that our kids are in now.
Yeah. And for me, it's reality is also very, very, very real for me. When I was my daughter's age, I was 8, and there was a little boy in my class who was abducted and murdered. So I was 8 and being told that this little boy's not coming back to school because something really bad has happened to him. And I remember my mum going into overprotective mode. Now as a parent, I get it. I really get it. That's still, and it was a long time ago, but it's fresh in my mind still.
And you think they're going to be safe there sitting on your lounge on a device as opposed to down the street. It's hard. I'm trying to teach the tricky people message to my kids in playgrounds and things, that there are tricky people in the world, but equally there are tricky people hiding behind these online identities
you don't know who you're talking to. And it's, as a parent, you just want to keep your kids safe.
Yeah.
And
Exactly. Never apologize for that. I think, in the struggle of all the things that we've got to consider as parents, and inclusion and connectedness, as we talked about, is so critically important. Never apologize for safety first. I can only imagine how traumatizing that would have been for you, but also for your mother. I would be exactly the same. I would have really gone into absolute overdrive, as I imagine many of the parents did at that school. That's an incredibly traumatic thing to happen, and that would follow you for the rest of your life in some way, shape, or form. I certainly have. Probably, I would say I'm a hyper-vigilant parent because of some of my experiences as a police officer. And I know that sometimes it's a bit irrational, but I would rather protect them. And as long as I'm allowing them to safely participate and for my issues not to overpower their needs, to develop into the people that they are, I think that's okay. But certainly never apologize for choosing safety. That's our number one role as parents, is to keep our kids safe and help them thrive. And sometimes we've got to make tough decisions around that. We know our kids best. And I think sometimes you just got to have the confidence in yourself that you are making the right choice for them at that time.
Yes, you've given us so many helpful tips and ideas of things we can do. Sign the 36 months petition. We certainly have. One other thing I wanted to touch on, I know you were a competitive swimmer growing up, and I feel like this is a really good strategy for parents to think of out of school activities for the kids to be involved with, potentially having kids that are outside of their school unit, that they've got other people and, an activity to keep them on the straight and narrow. And I'm sure that you saw many benefits to that growing up.
I couldn't agree more. I think you don't need to go to the levels that I did for the benefits of sport to be so prevalent, but certainly keeping kids busy. I can speak to this from my time as a police officer. The ones that had that just free time after school where they were let to roll around Westfield, Bondi Junction, trouble will find them and they will find trouble. It's sometimes inevitable. So giving them something that keeps them busy is really great, but also develops the skills they need for life. So if I look back on my swimming days, having to get up, for 6 or 7 years at 4:45 every single day other than Sundays taught me about grit and consistency. Jumping into a cold pool outside in 11 degrees taught me about being tough and courageous. Being able to develop those skills, they transfer in every part of your life. And certainly for kids, if they can build that sense of self, build that self-esteem and practice those skills, that will help them no matter where they go. So sport, I couldn't agree more. It's got to be a big part of their life, or an activity that makes them feel good.
Yeah,
and
dance or taekwondo.
It might be art classes if your kid's not
sporty. Might be chess
but
club.
But just something. Yeah,
exactly. Something that makes them feel good about themselves and that they're accomplishing something. That's what I'd be focusing on.
Well, I'm off to unplug the phone charger from beside my bed.
Do you know what's funny?
Somewhere else in the house.
Isn't this so hilarious? I actually left my phone at home today by accident, and I feel like my arm's missing or something. It's like I was driving and going, oh no, I can't even message Kerrie.
Oh my gosh, it's crazy. You should look up, there's a term for it. I think it's called nomophobia, the fear of not having your device with you.
Yeah.
It's crazy. There's a definition for everything.
I was just thinking that.
It's crazy. It's part and parcel of our life these days. But I think being mindful and moderating your time and occasionally choosing to leave it at home, that's where we sort of get that good balance.
I love that. It starts with us.
It really does.
Yes,
it really does.
Absolutely.
Yaz, thank you so much for your time and your insight today. Right back at the start, you gave us unprepared as the word that described you before you became a mum. Can you give us one word to describe who you are now that you have got kids?
One word. Curious. I'll always be curious. I think that's the center of everything when it comes to kids. We've got to make sure that we don't judge them, that we don't judge ourselves. And I think that mindset of curiosity is the way to approach everything for the future.
I love that.
Yeah, that's great.
You do such important work. Thank you so much, Yaz. We're going to put all the links in the show notes so everyone can get all of your stuff, because it's important stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, ladies. It was great.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining us on How Motherhood Changed Me. We'd love you to be part of the conversation by connecting with us on social media. And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review and subscribe.